Zephyra Quill had the look of someone who'd bitten into a chili pepper-laced brownie by mistake. The command deck of the Deep Space Listening Post was no more glamorous than the basement of a high school, if basements had a penchant for blinking lights and the distant hum of galaxies laughing at you. Or perhaps that was just Zephyra's own paranoia manifesting. She rubbed her temples, willing the headache to become sentient and leave on its own. "Commander," said an annoyingly chipper voice behind her. "You're going to want to see this." She swiveled her chair with the grace of a dancer who'd just tripped, to face Declan Voss, the Post's communication officer and resident optimist, an insufferable condition in this universe. He was practically vibrating with excitement, which Zephyra found deeply unsettling, like a kitten preparing to pounce on a grenade. "If it's another, lost in translation, mishap, I swear I'll upload your consciousness into the ship's coffee machine," she said, with just a touch of affection. Declan only grinned wider, unfazed by threats of potential virtual caffeine imprisonment. "Better," he replied, tapping on the holographic interface above his station. "We've got a signal, but not just any signal. This one's giving our translators a migraine." Zephyra raised an eyebrow. "More than usual? Imagine a migraine marrying a hangover," Declan replied, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Congratulations, it's a signal from a parallel universe." She blinked. "Parallel universe? Declan, I've been on this rust bucket long enough to know that universe is just a polite way of saying somewhere we really don't want to be." He chuckled. "And yet here we are, Commander." The rest of the crew, a ragtag collection of misfits and malcontents, gathered around. Julius, Doc, Morley, the ship's medic, looked up from a questionable sandwich, chewing thoughtfully as though it held the secrets of the cosmos. Kin, the engineer with more tattoos than common sense, leaned against a console, her eyes half closed as she listened. "So what's this signal saying? Hello from the other side, or something more ominous?" Kin drawled, picking at the grease under her nails. Declan tapped one final command, and the message played, a low droning that soon resolved into a voice both mechanical and alien, like a toaster trying to do Shakespeare. "Attention, inhabitants of Universe Alpha 7 to 19. Sarcasm is hereby banned under the Interdimensional Treaty of Universal Communication Standards. Non-compliance will result in unfortunate consequences." The crew stared at each other, jaws collectively scraping the deck's grimy floor. Zephyra's eyebrow arched so high it risked detaching from her face. "Well, that explains the migraine," Doc said, swallowing his bite with difficulty. "Bloody hell, are they serious?" "Oh, I'm sure they're dead serious," Zephyra muttered, her voice dripping with irony. "Ban sarcasm, that's like banning breathing, or..." She paused, glancing at Declan's unfathomably cheerful expression, smiling without cause. Kin snorted, half amused, half horrified. "This is a joke, right? Some intergalactic prank?" "If it is, it's not funny," Declan said, his grin finally faltering. "The signal's genuine. We've triple-checked it." Zephyra rubbed her eyes. "So what are these unfortunate consequences?" "Oh, you know," Declan shrugged. "Probably something like obliteration, assimilation, or worse, mandatory empathy sessions." The crew groaned in unison, Kin muttering something about the irony of sarcasm being a universal crime. "Well, this is just perfect," Zephyra sighed, secretly delighted at the absurdity of it all. "We finally make contact with a parallel universe, and they want us to give up our only coping mechanism." "What's next?" Doc asked. "They gonna ban cynicism too? We might as well surrender now." "Don't give ideas," Kin warned, smirking. "Next they'll have us all wearing matching uniforms and singing Kumbaya." Zephyra's mind raced. This wasn't just a threat, it was a challenge. The universe had handed him the ultimate bureaucratic nightmare, and she found it strangely invigorating. "All right team, let's figure out what we're dealing with here. Declan, I want a detailed analysis of that signal. Find out who these cosmic killjoys are and what they want with us." "On it," Declan replied, the familiar spark returning to his eyes. "Kin, check our comms and make sure we're not talking to ourselves. I want to know if this is some cosmic feedback loop or a genuine transmission." Kin gave a lazy salute, already moving to her console. Aye, Commander." "Doc, dig up any records we might have on interdimensional treaties. See if sarcasm's banned because we're too good at it or because they can't take a joke." Doc nodded, heading to the archives with a resigned sigh. "I'll let you know if I find anything that isn't written in legalese." Zephyra took a deep breath, savoring the chaos. "All right people, let's poke this signal with a stick and see what screams." As the crew hustled to their tasks, Zephyra stared at the vastness outside the viewport, thinking that space was like a terrible roommate, vast, empty, and full of unpleasant surprises. They were stuck in a cosmic game of telephone with beings who apparently lacked a sense of humor. The universe had quite the sense of irony. And as she settled back into her chair, a wry smile tugging at her lips, Zephyra knew one thing for certain. If the universe was going to try and ban sarcasm, it was in for a hell of a fight. Zephyra Quill watched her crew scatter like cockroaches when the lights came on, each heading to their designated corners of this not-so-glamorous deep space listening post. The command deck was alive with the beeps and boops of equipment that had seen better days, maybe decades ago, and the distant hum of galaxies planning their next cosmic party. She wondered if this whole universe was just one big cosmic joke with them as the punchline. She ran a hand through her hair, which was starting to feel like it had been styled by gravity failure, and glanced at the last straggler, Rook Thorne. Rook was the engineer who, unlike most engineers, somehow managed to make grease stains look like a fashion choice. Today, he was tinkering with a part of the console that presumably hadn't needed tinkering until he decided otherwise. Rook, Zephyra called out. You catch that lovely message from our interdimensional neighbors? Yeah, I heard it, Rook replied, eyes not leaving his work. And I say, let em try banning sarcasm. It's like trying to ban stupidity, good luck with that. Right? I mean, they're talking about eradicating a cornerstone of our culture, Zephyra said, leaning against the console. How are we supposed to express ourselves? Interpretive dance? Rook chuckled, a low rumble like an engine trying to start. I might pay to see Declan try that. What? Dance is the only thing I'm bad at. Declan piped in, his ears apparently tuned to catch any mention of his name. Declan, you're bad at a lot of things, but your optimism compensates, Zephyra said, giving him a smirk. Well, thank you for that, I think. Declan returned to his station, probably to analyze the signal from the universe that lacked humor, while Zephyra turned to find Kin and Juno Cade, their linguist, murmuring together in a corner. Juno was the resident expert on languages, having the dubious honor of translating whatever nonsense the universe threw at them. She was flicking through data on her tablet, her expression as lively as that of someone watching paint dry. Juno, Zephyra called over. Got any insights into why our cosmic critics have it in for sarcasm? Just a theory, Juno replied, her voice like a sigh set to music, but maybe sarcasm doesn't translate well across universes. It's like trying to explain color to a fish. Your analogies always brighten my day, Juno, Kin drawled, still picking at her nails. But seriously, who doesn't get sarcasm? It's like breathing, except more necessary. That's what's got me concerned, Juno said, scrolling through her tablet. If sarcasm doesn't translate, and they're imposing laws based on their understanding, we could be in for more than just a rude awakening. Zephyra looked at her crew, each one a puzzle piece of dysfunction and brilliance. They were the kind of people who would argue for hours over the best way to make toast, yet somehow managed to keep this tin can in space operational. So, they want to ban sarcasm because they don't get it. Maybe they think it's aggressive or something, Zephyra suggested. Or maybe they're just really, really boring, Kin added with a snort. Boring or not, we need to understand them, Juno said, before they decide. Unfortunate consequences involve more than our sense of humor being shot to hell. Rook finished fiddling with his console and leaned back, crossing his arms. So, we dig into their culture, find out what makes them tick and why they're allergic to style and wit. Exactly, Zephyra nodded. We need to understand what we're up against, figure out their reasoning, if any. Juno sighed dramatically, an artist forced to paint with finger paints. So you'll dig up everything we have on the Interdimensional Treaty of Universal Communication Standards. Maybe there's a loophole or something we can exploit. Do that, Zephyra agreed. Meanwhile, Kin, I want our comms squeaky clean. No echoes, no bouncing signals. If we're going to retort, I want him to hear every glorious word. You got it, boss, Kin replied, already moving to her console with the kind of lazy grace that suggested naps were her true calling in life. Zephyra took a moment to watch her team at work. They might have been a ragtag bunch, but they were hers, and right now, they were the best chance the universe had for a coherent response, a terrifying thought if there ever was one. Rook, she called out again, watching him tinker, which was his default state, see if you can boost our signal strength. I want whatever response we throw at them to hit harder than a supernova. Sure thing, Commander, Rook said, not looking up. But if it means I have to reroute power from the coffee machine, I'm quitting. Noted, Zephyra replied with a chuckle. Keep our most precious resource intact. She tapped a finger against her console, trying to think through the haze of caffeine withdrawal everyone would face if Rook made good on his threat. The universe was a big, messy playpen, full of cosmic bullies who didn't understand the rules, mostly because they were making them up as they went along. And here they were, trying to outwit a universe that wanted to take away the one language humans were truly fluent in, sarcasm. Okay, people, Zephyra said, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. Let's get to work. If the universe thinks it's gonna silence us, it's got another thing coming. Her crew gave a ragged cheer, the kind you might hear at a funeral or a particularly uninspired birthday party. But it was enough. They knew the stakes, and they'd face them with the only weapon they had left, a wicked sense of humor. As the crew settled into their tasks with the determination of snails on a caffeine high, Zephyra felt a strange sense of optimism seep in. It wasn't the kind of cheerful optimism that made you miss the point of a joke, but the kind that suggested maybe, just maybe, they'd come out of this with their sanity intact. Juno, Zephyra called, her mind already churning with possibilities. Once you've got a bead on their motives, let's figure out how to make them regret underestimating the power of sarcasm. On it, Juno replied, her fingers ablur over her tablet, her eyes sharp and piercing like a hawk spotting prey. As Zephyra turned back to her console, the grin tugging at the corners of her mouth seemed to say to the universe, challenge accepted. Hours passed, the kind of hours that stretched until you'd nearly forgotten what time was supposed to feel like. Declan was still deep in his analysis, Kin muttered curses at uncooperative equipment, and Juno was surrounded by a semicircle of screens, each filled with alien scripts and data that made her look like a mystical librarian of doom. Rook, in his corner, was now muttering under his breath like some mad scientist, surrounded by cables and tools, his head occasionally popping up to shoot Zephyra a thumbs up or a grimace, depending on how things were going. Finally, Juno broke the tense silence. All right, I think I've got something. Zephyra perked up, as did everyone else who wasn't neck-deep in wires or holographic displays. Hit us with it, Juno, Zephyra encouraged, leaning forward with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for lottery draws. Juno pushed away from her screens, rubbing her eyes. Okay, so here's the deal. The treaty these beings uphold, it's all about maintaining what they call universal harmony. They see sarcasm as disruptive, a force that can unravel social cohesion. Social cohesion? Rook snorted. They really haven't met us, have they? Exactly, Juno said, ignoring the interruption. To them, our sarcasm is like hitting a wrong note in a symphony. And they're all about their symphonies. So they're like space librarians? Kin quipped. Shushing us for making noise? Kind of, Juno said, but with the power to enforce their rules. Zephyra pondered this, her eyes narrowing. All right, Juno, what's their Achilles heel? Every perfect society's got one. Well, from what I've gleaned, their reliance on harmony is also their weakness, Juno explained. They're so focused on it, they're blind to anything outside their perfect little bubble of niceties. So, if we can disrupt that harmony, Declan began, his face lighting up like a Christmas tree plugged into a nuclear reactor. We might just throw them off their game, Zephyra finished, a wicked glint in her eye. That's the theory, Juno said, but it's risky. If we're not careful, we'll just give them more reason to enforce their rules. Risky is our middle name, Kin said with a smirk. Besides, what's life without a little chaos? Zephyra nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders, a familiar and almost comforting burden. All right, team, we know what we have to do. Let's show these interdimensional fun police what sarcasm really means. Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. With that, they dove back into their work, a ragtag crew united by a single, defiant goal, to prove that in a universe full of rules and regulations, humans would always carve out a space for humor, wit, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. As Zephyra watched her crew throw themselves into the fray, she couldn't help but grin. If the universe thought it could silence them, it had another thing coming. This was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the right to be irreverent in the face of cosmic absurdity. The crew of the Deep Space Listening Post, a ragtag band of misfits and malfunctioning personalities, were embroiled in a struggle that had them scratching their heads harder than a monkey with a math problem. The universe, or at least some humorless corner of it, wanted to take away their sarcasm. And really, that was like trying to take away a fish's water, or more accurately, a drunkard's favorite bar stool. Zephyra Quill, their ever-determined commander, had called for a meeting in the command deck, which was generously furnished with technology that looked like it might have been cutting-edge back when dinosaurs were considering their asteroid insurance policies. The crew gathered around the holographic interface, a glowing altar to their collective frustration. All right, team, Zephyra started, her tone the kind of upbeat that only happened right before you ask someone to do something stupid or dangerous. We need to dive into this alien universe through simulations. We've got to understand why they think sarcasm is the root of all evil. Declan, the communication officer who was as optimistic as a puppy in a field of bacon, didn't miss a beat. Sounds like a plan. Maybe they've got a good reason. Like, sarcasm caused a galactic plague or something. Right, Because that's totally rational, Kin drawled, her voice as dry as the Sahara on a hot day. I'm sure it's our biting wit that's the real cosmic villain here. Rook Thorne, the engineer who had somehow managed to make grease stains look like fashion statements, chimed in while juggling a spanner. Maybe sarcasm causes their equivalent of violent diarrhea. That'd explain the panic. Juno Cade, their linguist, rolled her eyes, clearly unmoved. Less about bowel movements, more about cultural impact, Rook. We need a deeper understanding. Zephyra nodded, resisting the urge to facepalm. Juno's right. These simulations should give us a peek into their culture. We need to see what makes them tick and why they're so bloody terrified of sarcastic humans. Good thing we've got the simulator, Doc Morley, the resident medic and part-time sandwich enthusiast, said around a mouthful of pastrami on rye. Nothing like virtual reality to remind us how much real life sucks. Exactly, Zephyra said, ignoring Doc's culinary commentary. So, strap in and let's see if we can navigate their universe without causing an interdimensional incident. With the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tax audits, the crew plugged into the simulation. They were enveloped by a wave of digital light, their senses transported to the alien universe. The landscape unfolded around them, a blend of sterile beauty that suggested its decorators had an unhealthy obsession with minimalism and monotones. Wow, Declan said, eyes wide. It's like being inside a giant IKEA catalogue. Without the meatballs, though. Welcome to Blandland, Kin muttered, scanning the surroundings. Where the wild colors roam free and assault your senses at every turn. Juno did her best to suppress a laugh, her focus on the alien structures. This is their version of harmony, all right. Perfectly balanced and devoid of anything remotely interesting. As they moved through the alien environment, they attracted the attention of the locals, beings who looked like someone had merged a porcelain doll with a piece of abstract art. Their expressions, if you could call them that, were as lively as a tax form. Okay, I'm getting a read here, Juno said, studying the alien text that flowed past like a ticker tape. This is a central hub for communication. They call it the Nexus. Looks like a snooze fest, Rook said, unimpressed. But hey, at least it's clean. Zephyra motioned for silence as they approached a group of the beings engaged in what appeared to be a very formal exchange of pleasantries. The alien's speech was fluid and melodic, like a song sung by a committee of very serious songbirds. Juno, can we understand them? Zephyra asked, squinting at the display. Juno nodded, adjusting her translator. I'm working on it. It's weird. Their language is built on layers of implied meaning and subtext, but with none of the fun stuff we use, like sarcasm or irony. Figures, Kin said. The one thing they could really use, and they banned it. The aliens turned toward them, their faces a study in neutrality, as if they'd taken too many lessons from poker players or politicians. One of them stepped forward, speaking in a voice that could have smoothed the edges off a brick. Greetings, travelers, the alien said through the translator. We welcome you to our Nexus. How may we assist you in understanding the principles of universal harmony? Declan, ever the eager diplomat, stepped up. Hi there, we're just trying to understand your culture and why sarcasm is a problem. The alien's expression didn't change, though there might have been the faintest flicker of confusion. Sarcasm disrupts harmony. It introduces unpredictability and discord. Zephyra took a step forward, her tone carefully diplomatic. But isn't unpredictability part of what makes life interesting? It's how we humans spark creativity. The alien's calm demeanor might have hidden a shadow of horror. Creativity should not come at the cost of harmony. It leads to chaos. Chaos is good, Rook interjected with a shrug. Gets the blood pumping. Ignoring the engineer, the alien continued. Our society values balance above all. Sarcasm undermines balance. Kin crossed her arms, her expression one of disbelief. So you're saying you've got an entire universe set up to be as boring as possible on purpose? And sarcasm ruins that? Correct, the alien replied, not a hint of irony. Sarcasm introduces elements of misunderstanding and conflict. Misunderstanding and conflict, Doc mused, leaning on a virtual tree with all the nonchalance of someone watching paint dry. Sounds like every family reunion I've ever been to. Zephyra was thoughtful, weighing her words. We humans rely on sarcasm to cope with stress, to express ourselves. It's part of our identity. The alien regarded her with what might have been a glimmer of pity, though it was hard to tell through the poker face. Perhaps that is why humanity struggles with harmony. Maybe, Zephyra conceded, but we thrive on it. It's part of what makes us adaptable. The alien paused, as if considering this heresy. Adaptability at the cost of stability is not advisable. Depends on how you define stability, Juno said, stepping in. For us, it's a way of navigating the chaos and finding meaning. Their alien guide seemed to process this, then gave a slight nod. Our misunderstanding may stem from fundamental differences in societal values. We will deliberate. As the crew retreated from the conversation with the alien delegation, Zephyra regrouped her team in a virtual clearing, the serene surroundings at odds with the mental gymnastics they were performing. So, they see us as disruptors, Declan mused, still trying to wrap his head around the concept. But isn't it our differences that make us strong? Like, we bring a unique perspective. Unique is one way to put it, Kin said dryly. Annoying might be another from their point of view. Zephyra nodded, her mind working through the implications. We need to find a way to bridge the gap. Show them that our way is valid, too. Maybe we need to break it down, Juno suggested. Find common ground in the chaos. Or at least make them see that our chaos isn't as bad as they think, Rook added, twirling a wrench like a baton. Right, Zephyra agreed. If we can't convince them our way is better, we need to make sure they see it's not a threat. The crew nodded in agreement, the challenge ahead as daunting as ever. As they prepared to log out of the simulation, Zephyra felt a renewed sense of determination. They'd navigate this universe, misunderstandings and all, and they'd do it with the kind of irreverent flair that only humans could muster. Back in the real world, the crew returned to their battered ship, greeted by the comforting beeps and boops of old machinery. Zephyra leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of their task settle like a familiar old coat. All right, folks, she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the station. We've got our work cut out for us. But if the universe thinks it can scare us off with rules about harmony, it's underestimating the power of good old-fashioned human stubbornness. The crew, ever the mix of brilliance and dysfunction, got back to work with renewed energy. They would prove, one way or another, that sarcasm was more than just a linguistic tool, it was a way of life, and they weren't about to give it up without a fight. As Zephyra watched her team, a wry smile tugged at her lips. The universe might be vast and filled with rules, but this corner of it was theirs, and they intended to make their voices heard, loud, clear, and with enough sarcasm to make even the most humorless alien crack a smile. Zephyra Quill surveyed her crew with a mix of pride and exasperation, like a parent watching their kids juggle knives for the first time. The universe was out to get them, and it wasn't just the galaxy's crappiest attempt at humor. The aliens had basically declared sarcasm as the cosmic equivalent of treason. The stakes were higher than a stoner at a reggae concert. All right, team, she started, her voice cutting through the usual chaos. We've got a problem. These aliens want us to ditch sarcasm or they'll cut us off. Great, Kin snorted, rolling her eyes. How about we give up breathing while we're at it? I'll see if I can hold my breath that long, Declan added, grinning like a kid who'd just discovered chocolate. Might be a fun experiment. Julius, Doc, Morley, still nursing the remnants of his sandwich like a faithful companion, shook his head. Give up sarcasm? That's like expecting me to give up deli meats. Zephyra crossed her arms, exuding authority even as her patience wore thin. We need to figure out how to communicate with them without losing our charm, or our heads. Ideas? Rook Thorne, who somehow managed to look both incredibly lazy and busy at the same time, piped up. We could try interpretive dance. I hear it's universal. Right, Juno Cade said, her tone dripping with skepticism. Because nothing says, we come in peace, like a bunch of humans flailing around. Zephyra ignored the jabs and focused on the task at hand. Seriously, we need a solution. The translator's not getting us anywhere with their sarcasm ban. Declan, ever the optimist, bounced on his heels. What if we reason with them? You know, show them that sarcasm isn't all bad. Reason with them? Kin arched an eyebrow. You do realize we're dealing with beings who think a warm smile is an act of war, right? Rook twirled his spanner, his expression one of amused indifference. What if we pretend to be really earnest? Like, take everything literally for once. Zephyra considered this, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. So we flip the script. Be so straightforward that they get dizzy trying to understand how we function. Acting like machines, Juno mused aloud. We'd be so boring, they might just leave us alone. Doc finished his sandwich with the air of a man preparing for gladiatorial combat. Or die of boredom, might just work. With their plan, such as it was, the crew re-entered the simulation. Returning to Blandland, they were once again greeted by the alien delegates, who were probably wondering if this lot was the best humanity could muster. Welcome back, travelers, the same alien spokesperson addressed them, its voice smoother than polished marble. Have you considered our request for compliance? Zephyra stepped forward, her expression a masterclass in deadpan. Yes, we have decided to comply by being as straightforward and literal as possible. The alien paused, its porcelain features unreadable but somehow managing to convey the essence of confusion. Literal? Absolutely, Declan chimed in, with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just inhaled a novelty helium balloon. We're turning over a new leaf. No more sarcasm, just facts. And tea, Rook added, because why not? Lots of tea. The alien tilted its head, processing this new development like a computer trying to run solitaire on a toaster. Very well. How may we assist you in understanding our culture? We want to understand harmony, Juno began, her voice steady. How do you maintain it in a universe so diverse? The alien nodded, their movements precise and deliberate. We adhere to practices of balance, ensuring all actions and expressions contribute to equilibrium. Kin couldn't resist. So, like the universe's most boring game of Jenga? A sharp glance from Zephyra silenced her, but not before Declan let out a snort. What we mean is, that sounds very efficient. The alien seemed satisfied with this reply, oblivious to the undercurrent of mockery. We are efficient. Efficiency ensures stability. Doc leaned in, whispering to Juno. I'm starting to think they've got efficiency confused with lifelessness. Shush, Juno hissed back, though her lips twitched with suppressed laughter. Zephyra took a deep breath, contemplating their next move. We'd like to learn more about your communication methods. How do you convey complex ideas without sarcasm? The alien gestured to a nearby structure, sleek and sterile. Our communication is direct. We use precise language and avoid ambiguity. Rook muttered under his breath, sounds like a thrilling read. Their alien guide led him inside, where they were surrounded by a display of symbols and graphs. The visuals were pristine but utterly devoid of any excitement, like staring at wallpaper designed by an accountant. Declan stared at the display, his face scrunched in concentration. So, this is like your idea of entertainment? The alien nodded. Yes, it is efficient and informative. Kin couldn't help but comment, and about as entertaining as watching paint dry. Zephyra shot her a warning look, though she privately agreed. Can you show us a communication in action? The alien obliged, activating a holographic display. The scene depicted a discussion between two of their kind, the dialogue remarkably civil and devoid of any emotional spikes. Wow, Doc said, his voice dripping with sarcasm that even the translator couldn't filter out. I'm on the edge of my seat. The alien either missed the jab or chose to ignore it. We value clarity. It prevents miscommunication. Juno stepped forward, her analytical mind in overdrive. But doesn't it also limit personal expression? Our expression is considered in our actions, the alien explained. We demonstrate harmony through deeds, not words. Rook scratched his head, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, when words are as exciting as tax returns, I guess deeds are all you've got left. Zephyra intervened, sensing they were skating on thin ice. We'll take this into consideration while we assess how we can better engage with your kind. The alien inclined its head, possibly believing they had made progress. Your consideration is appreciated. As they exited the simulation, Zephyra felt the weight of the task ahead settle like a lead blanket. The universe was vast, but their slice of it seemed to be getting smaller by the second. Back on the command deck, surrounded by the comforting chaos of outdated technology, Zephyra turned to her crew. All right, what's the consensus? How do we convince them sarcasm isn't a threat? Kin was the first to speak, her tone defiant. We can't force them to understand us, but we can show them that our way works too. Declan nodded, his optimism undimmed. Maybe we can demonstrate how sarcasm can actually help. You know, like through a practical example. Doc leaned back, the ghost of a grin on his face. A little sarcasm saves lives. I'd love to see those porcelain heads try to argue against that. Rook glanced around, his eyes bright with mischief. Or we just act so boring that they realize a little unpredictability isn't so bad. Right, Zephyra said, her determination renewed. We need to come up with a plan to show them that our chaos has its own kind of harmony. As the team brainstormed ideas, the room crackled with a mix of sarcasm and sincerity, a blend of hope and cynicism that was uniquely human. We'll prove that sarcasm isn't our enemy, Juno said, her voice firm. It's part of what makes us who we are. Zephyra nodded, feeling the resolve settle in her bones. And if they can't see that, well, we'll just have to make them. The crew was ready, and whatever the universe threw their way next, they'd be armed with wit, sarcasm, and a refusal to give up their way of life. Because if there was one thing humans did best, it was thrive in the chaos they created. As they prepared for their next move, Zephyra couldn't help but smile. The universe might have its rules, but this crew was determined to break them, one sarcastic remark at a time. Zephyra Quill stared at the holographic interface, which flickered like a dying light bulb in a horror movie, and wondered, not for the first time, if the universe was laughing at them. It seemed that way, especially now, as the so-called interdimensional neighbors insisted on their anti-sarcasm edict. It was like being told to dance without music while balancing on a knife's edge. The command deck buzzed with the low hum of ancient machinery, each beep and boop sounding more like a digital death rattle than a functional part of a space station. Morale among the crew was lower than a snake's belly in a drainage ditch, and Zephyra felt the pressure mounting like a weight on her shoulders. If she wasn't careful, they'd all be squashed flat under its unbearable load. Cheer up, folks, Zephyra said, trying to inject a bit of levity into the room. After all, we're only facing potential isolation and cultural extinction. Kin snorted, her voice a dry rasp. Great pep talk, boss. Next, tell us about the benefits of poking a sleeping bear. I think I'd rather poke the bear, Rook muttered from his corner, where he was attempting to fix a panel with a spanner that looked older than the station itself. At least it'll be over quickly. We should consider the upside, Declan piped up, ever the optimist. At least we're not dealing with space pirates. Just aliens who want us to be humorless drones. Just, Doc's eyebrows threatened to disappear into his hairline. I'd take a peg-legged pirate over a humorless alien any day. At least the pirate's likely to share his rum. Juno, ever analytical, leaned over a console, scrutinizing the alien symbols like they might reveal their secrets if she stared hard enough. Our attempts to bridge the cultural gap are failing. Every message we send, they respond with more rules. It's like playing chess with someone who insists the knight should move in a straight line. Zephyra sighed. And here I thought galactic diplomacy would be glamorous. Instead, it's like babysitting toddlers who know how to build spaceships. Kin gave a mirthless chuckle. Toddlers with spaceships. Now there's a recipe for disaster. We need a new approach, Zephyra said, more to herself than anyone else. Something they won't see coming. Like what? Rook asked. We've already tried being straightforward, and that went over about as well as a lead balloon. Maybe we need to be so direct it's unsettling, Juno suggested, tapping her chin. Make them question their assumptions about us. Doc shrugged, polishing off another sandwich with the enthusiasm of a man who believed salami was the best thing since sliced bread. Or we could just keep annoying them until they leave us alone. Worked with my last ex. Declan shook his head, his face a mask of mock seriousness. You're suggesting we annoy advanced aliens who can cut us off from the rest of the universe? Bold strategy, Cotton, but not without merit, Zephyra mused, her eyes narrowing as a new idea began to form. Maybe we can use their own logic against them. Kin leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Sounds risky. I like it. Risky doesn't even begin to cover it, Rook said, tossing his spanner on the table. But what have we got to lose? The universe itself, Zephyra replied, a sardonic smile playing at her lips. Or at least, our place in it. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rhythmic thrum of the station's life support systems, a reminder that, for now, they still had air to breathe and time to think. All right, Zephyra said finally. Let's run through our options one more time. Declan, any luck with the translators? Declan shook his head, exasperation etched in every line of his face. They're about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Every time we think we're making progress, they throw another curveball. Figures, Kin muttered. They're probably laughing at us right now. Juno frowned, her mind turning over the problem like a Rubik's Cube. We're missing something. They're communicating something we're not picking up on. Maybe they're using a language we don't even recognize, Doc suggested, half joking. Like interpretive mime, Zephyra considered this, her mind darting from one possibility to another. Or maybe it's not their language we need to understand, but ours. Rook raised an eyebrow. Come again? Our language, Zephyra repeated, the idea solidifying in her mind. We've been so focused on translating their messages, we haven't considered how they're interpreting ours. Are you saying our language could be the problem? Juno asked, intrigued. Or the solution, Zephyra said. We just need to figure out how to use it. Maybe there's something in the way we communicate that's more powerful than we realize. Great, Kin said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. A secret weapon we didn't know we had. How very convenient. Convenient or not, Zephyra said, it's the best lead we've got. Let's dig into this. We need to understand what makes our communication so unique. Sure, Rook said, his tone light. Everyone loves a good mystery. Especially when the stakes are our continued existence. All right, team, Zephyra said, her resolve hardening. We've got a new direction. Let's find out what makes us tick, and how we can use it to keep our sarcasm alive. As the crew delved into the intricacies of human language, the atmosphere on the command deck transformed. The weight of despair was still there, lurking in the corners like a hungry shadow, but it was tempered by a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through this cosmic mess. Hours passed, marked by the steady ticks of the station's decrepit clock. They pored over every nuance of human speech, analyzing idioms, metaphors, and, yes, even sarcasm. What they found was a tangled web of meaning, a complex system that defied simple translation. Look at this, Juno said, pointing to a particularly convoluted phrase. In any other language, this would be gibberish. But in human terms, it's poetry. Poetry or madness, Kin countered. Sometimes I think they're the same thing. Maybe that's it, Declan said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. Our language isn't just words. It's a reflection of who we are, our chaos, our unpredictability. Doc nodded, finally seeing the potential in their predicament. It's what makes us human. And it's what they don't understand. Zephyra felt a thrill of excitement at the possibilities unfolding before them. Then that's what we need to focus on. We'll show them that our way of communicating is more than just words. And maybe, Rook added, they'll see that there's strength in our chaos. They worked late into the night, driven by a newfound purpose. As they pieced together a plan, the oppressive weight of their isolation began to lift. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they allowed themselves to hope. Zephyra looked around at her crew, each one of them an enigma in their own right, a collection of quirks, flaws, and strengths that came together to form something greater than the sum of its parts. She felt a surge of pride at the ragtag group she called her team. We'll get through this, she said, her voice steady and sure. We'll outsmart them, with our language and our wit. Here's hoping they have a sense of humor, Declan quipped. Or this could get awkward. Awkward is our specialty, Kin said with a grin. Let's show them what we're made of. And sir, with a plan in place and a new resolve burning bright, the crew prepared to face their interdimensional neighbors once more. They would fight for their way of life with the only weapons they had. Words, wit, and the stubborn resilience that defined them as human. As they readied themselves to enter the simulation again, Zephyra couldn't help but smile. The universe might be vast and indifferent, but this crew was anything but. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with sarcasm firmly intact. The command deck was buzzing with a mix of anxious energy and gallows humor. Zephyra Quill paced back and forth, her boots tapping out an uneven rhythm that matched the chaos of her thoughts. Around her, the crew huddled near the flickering holographic interface, their faces bathed in the ghostly glow of outdated technology. All right, team, Zephyra said, her voice cutting through the din like a knife through synthetic butter. We've got a plan, or something that resembles one, if you squint hard enough. Good, because my eyesight's pretty bad, Rook Thorn quipped, leaning against a console that had more patches than a pirate's eye. Kin snorted. Half-baked plans are the best kind. Less likely to be overcooked. Or undercooked, depending on who's in the kitchen, Declan Voss chimed in, his tone as bright as ever. But hey, at least it's not a souffle. Those things always collapse. Speaking of collapse, Doc Morley said, munching on a salami sandwich like it was going out of style, any chance this plan involves us not getting spaced by humorless aliens? That's the idea, Zephyra replied, crossing her arms. We're going to use our biggest weapon against them. Our charming personalities, Doc asked, eyebrows raised. The combined effect of our sarcasm and questionable life choices, Juno Cade said dryly, not looking up from the alien symbols she was analyzing. If that doesn't scare 'em off, nothing will. Zephyra nodded. Exactly. We need to show them that sarcasm isn't just a series of clever quips. It's a form of subversion, a way to expose the cracks in their perfect little system. Like ants finding their way into a picnic, Declan said, grinning. Only with the ants, and the picnic is their sense of superiority. Terrifying imagery, Rook muttered, tapping a panel that responded with a sad little beep. Just the thing to keep me up at night. Kin shrugged, offering a lopsided grin. Better than counting sheep, unless they're sarcastic sheep, then we've got a situation. Focus, Zephyra said, though she couldn't help but smile at the crew's banter. It was a reminder that they were still fighting, in their own irreverent way. If sarcasm is our weapon, we need to wield it wisely. And how do we do that? Juno asked, finally tearing her gaze from the console. We turn it into a game, Zephyra said, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous light. We bait them with our words. Make them question their rules by showing them how ridiculous they are. Rook raised an eyebrow. So, what, we just start cracking jokes until they give up and go home? Not exactly, Zephyra replied. We craft messages that seem straightforward but are layered with sarcasm. Enough to pass their filters, but with a twist that makes them reconsider. Word bombs, Declan said, nodding. Explode their expectations from the inside out. And if they catch on? Doc asked, skepticism writ large on his face. What happens then? Then we improvise, Zephyra said, a wry smile on her lips. After all, that's what we do best. The crew set to work, their focus sharpening as they pieced together a strategy that resembled equal parts poetry and chaos. They crafted messages that danced around the lines of cultural etiquette like a tightrope walker with a flair for the dramatic. Hours melted away in a blur of sardonic wit and linguistic gymnastics. The station's lights dimmed to the dull glow of artificial twilight, casting long shadows that skulked in the corners like disgruntled specters. How about this one? Declan asked, reading aloud a draft of their latest communique. We appreciate your guidance on cultural matters and hope our dialogue continues to be as enlightening for you as it is for us. Yours ironically, the crew. Subtle, Kin said, nodding approvingly. Like a scalpel made of sarcasm. It's all about the misdirection, Juno added, her analytical mind untangling the layers of meaning they'd woven into their words. They'll have to read between the lines to catch the hidden message. And if they don't? Doc asked, looking up from his sandwich with a worried expression. What if they just get angry? Then we'll know we're onto something, Zephyra said, unwavering. The point is to make them question their assumptions. Even if it ruffles a few feathers. Or scales, or whatever they've got, Rook said, ever the realist. Though I'm not sure how we'll know if we've succeeded. Zephyra considered this, her mind ticking over the possibilities. We monitor their responses, look for changes in tone or new rules they try to impose. If they're reacting, then we've hit a nerve. Great, Kin said, her voice dripping with irony. Another waiting game, my favorite. Patience is a virtue, Declan reminded them, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of that fact. Or so they say. Who's they, anyway? Doc asked, polishing off the last of his salami. And why do they always seem to know what's best? They're probably the same people who thought it was a good idea to put a listening post in the middle of nowhere, Zephyra replied, her tone dry as desert sand. Juno chuckled softly. Nothing like being alone in the void to make you appreciate the little things. Like breathable air and the company of eccentric misfits. Thanks, I think, Rook said, though a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. All right, let's get this message out and see what happens. They sent the communique, watching as it zipped off into the ether, a digital arrow loosed into the vast unknown. The crew waited with bated breath, the silence on the command deck thick enough to choke. Time dragged by, each tick of the station's ancient clock echoing like a tolling bell. Finally, a response trickled back through the cosmos, filled with the usual bureaucratic flourishes. Another rule, Juno said, scanning the message. Looks like they didn't appreciate our irony. But they didn't cut us off, Declan pointed out, a hopeful note in his voice. Which means they're still listening. Good news, then, Kin said, raising an imaginary glass. Here's to keeping the lines open and the sarcasm flowing. Zephyra allowed herself a moment of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They'd poked the bear, and the bear hadn't swatted him down. Yet, keep refining the messages, she instructed, her tone firm and steady. If we can keep them on their toes, maybe we can buy ourselves enough time to figure out what they're really after. As the crew returned to their work, a sense of camaraderie settled over them like a warm blanket. They were in this together, for better or worse. And if their sarcasm was the key to survival, then they'd wield it with the precision of a surgeon and the flair of a street performer. The hours ticked by, marked by the gentle thrum of machinery and the occasional burst of laughter. They crafted message after message, each one a carefully constructed jigsaw puzzle of subtext and sarcasm. Rook, ever the tinkerer, seemed to find a rhythm in the chaos. I think I've got a beat on this, he said, glancing up from his work. We're not just sending words. We're sending a challenge wrapped in an enigma, encased in sarcasm, Juno added, her eyes bright with determination. Exactly the kind of thing to get under their skin. And if it doesn't, Doc asked, voicing the lingering question that hovered over them all. Then we keep trying, Zephyra said, her resolve unshakable. We don't stop until we've turned this mess into something we can live with. Like turning a nightmare into a mildly uncomfortable dream, Kin said, her grin infectious. Or a horror movie into an awkward comedy, Declan chimed in, his optimism undimmed. With each message, they pushed the boundaries of their creativity, testing the limits of their interdimensional neighbors' patience. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they felt like they were playing a game they might actually win. The command deck buzzed with an energy that was both frantic and exhilarating, as if they were standing on the edge of a precipice with nothing but their wits to keep them aloft. All right, Zephyra said, her voice steady and sure as she surveyed her team. Let's get ready for the next round. We'll show these aliens what it means to be human. As they prepared to launch their next volley of sarcastic wit into the void, the crew couldn't help but smile. They were united in purpose and defiant in spirit, ready to face whatever the universe threw their way. And through it all, their sarcasm burned bright, a beacon in the darkness, a testament to their resilience, and a reminder that even in the bleakest corners of space, humor was a force to be reckoned with. The command deck hummed, an orchestra of malfunctioning machinery and crew mutterings. Zephyra Quill paced in that relentless way she did, like a caged predator with too much to think about. She stopped, pivoting like she'd just remembered she'd left the oven on, if ovens existed in this metal coffin they called a listening post. All right, team, she declared, running a hand through her hair. Let's see if aliens hate sarcasm as much as they hate giving clear instructions. Doc Morley took a bite out of his latest sandwich, a pastrami this time, waving it in the air like a conductor's baton. And if they hate sarcasm enough to space us, then I hope they enjoy the sound of silence because that's all they're getting without us, Rook Thorne quipped, still squinting at a console that seemed to have more duct tape than circuits. Declan Voss leaned back in his chair, the optimist at heart despite the universe's best efforts to disabuse him of that notion. Look, it's like making a souffle, right? You gotta get the timing just right or it'll all fall flat. Except this souffle could explode and take us with it, Kin added, feet propped up on her console like she owned the place. But hey, nothing ventured, nothing spaced. Juno Cade snorted, her eyes still glued to the alien symbols. If this goes wrong, we'll be the first humans to get killed for having a sense of humor. Real trailblazers. Zephyra clapped her hands, a sharp sound that echoed through the room. Time to serve up some irony. Let's show them what human creativity looks like, wrapped in sarcasm and dipped in existential dread. Rook fiddled with the holographic interface, which flickered like a ghost in a machine too tired of existing. Drafting up a new message now. Something that says, we're listening, but also, we're laughing at you. Just like every family reunion, Declan remarked, tapping away at his console. The crew pooled their thoughts, weaving sarcasm into their words like a master weaver creating a tapestry of snide remarks. Each line was a jab, each phrase a sly wink that dared the aliens to read between the lines. Here's the latest draft, Rook said, sending the message to the main screen. Dear interdimensional overlords, we are humbled by your persistence in educating us on subtlety. May your stars never fade, and your rules never stop multiplying. Yours in eternal curiosity, the human race. Juno chuckled. It's perfect, enough to make them question their own absurdities without tipping them off. Or all it does is tip them off that we're slightly unhinged, Doc said, licking the last of the mustard from his fingers. But hey, that's our charm, right? Send it, Zephyra ordered, her voice carrying that rare blend of authority and mischief. Like a captain who's realized she's steering a ship made of jokes. They watched the message streak across the expanse, a volley of wit aimed at the heart of alien bureaucracy. Each second stretched like it was caught in a cosmic taffy pull, anticipation winding tighter with every tick of the clock. The response, when it came, was a veritable tome of rules and regulations, punctuated by an unexpected hiccup. A request for clarification on human cultural practices. Kin let out a low whistle. I think we just confused the hell out of them. They want to understand us better, Juno said, scanning the message with a growing grin. Our sarcasm sparked their curiosity. This is good. Or it's the calm before the storm, Doc muttered around a mouthful of rye. Let's hope they're more curious than vengeful. Zephyra nodded, feeling the momentum shift. We need to keep them guessing. Let's feed them more irony, and see how they dance. The crew set to crafting their next message, each line a calculated risk, each word a potential barb. They were weaving a web of humor and subversion so tangled that even they weren't sure where the joke ended and the strategy began. As they worked, the station's lights continued their slow cycle from dim to dimmer, casting long shadows that seemed to sway in time with their thoughts. The flickering glow painted their faces in alternating strips of determination and doubt. Rook was the first to break the silence. I've got another draft. Leaning into the absurdity. Let's hear it, Zephyra said, leaning forward in her chair. Dear cosmic neighbors, Rook read, we appreciate your interest in our cultural nuances. Sarcasm is as integral to us as breathing, much like your penchant for creating endless regulations. We eagerly await your next installment of Rules of the Universe. Declan laughed, a bright sound in the gloom. If they don't get it now, they never will. Juno, eyes narrowed in thought, added, and if they do get it, they'll either laugh or implode from the logical paradox. Here's hoping for laughter, Kin said, crossing her fingers for luck. Or at least a bemused resignation. With a collective nod, they sent the message into the void, a beacon of irony in the vast, uncaring universe. The response came faster this time, a terse communique that hinted at confusion and discomfort. They'd poked the bear again, and the bear was starting to question its own existence. Looks like they're floundering, Doc observed, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Not sure if they should double down or back off. They're not used to being questioned, Zephyra said, a spark of triumph in her eyes. Let's keep them on their toes. It's time to go for the jugular. The crew launched into action, their movements synchronized like clockwork, albeit a clock that occasionally lost an hour or two. They crafted a new message, dripping with enough sarcasm to fill a black hole. Dear rule makers of the cosmos, Kin dictated, we salute your dedication to order. Without your diligent oversight, our lives would be as chaotic as a souffle without structure. P.S., Declan added, We eagerly await your next instructions on how to properly fold napkins in zero gravity. Zephyra grinned, a fierce pride welling up in her chest. Let's see how they handle this one. As the message zipped off, the crew gathered around the holographic interface, a collective anticipation hanging in the air like a charge before a storm. The response, when it finally arrived, was almost comically brief. They're short on words, Rook noted, scanning the screen. But there's a request for a cultural exchange. The crew exchanged glances, a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. They'd done it. The aliens were curious, perhaps even willing to learn. Zephyra allowed herself a small, victorious smile. We've got them questioning their own rigidity. Now we just need to keep the momentum. They want to understand us, Juno said, almost incredulous. Our sarcasm, our humor, it's gotten under their skin. Or scales, or whatever, Doc added with a shrug. Doesn't really matter, does it? Not if it means they're willing to talk, Kin said, tapping her fingers idly on the console. Who knew sarcasm could be such a diplomatic weapon? Use, apparently, Declan said, the ever-optimist. Shows what a little creativity can do. With the aliens now intrigued rather than hostile, the crew felt the weight of their situation lift, if only a little. They had a chance to bridge the gap, to show their interdimensional neighbors that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or brute force, but their wit. As they prepared their next move, the command deck buzzed with a newfound energy, a hope that maybe, just maybe, they could change the rules of engagement. They would continue to prod and tease, to weave their sarcasm into a tapestry of understanding and revelation. Because if anyone could turn a grim situation into a light-hearted exchange, it was them. And maybe, just maybe, they'd prove that humor was the best way to traverse the vast, indifferent universe. Only time would tell, but for now, they were ready to face whatever came next, one sarcastic message at a time. The crew sat around the command deck, their expressions a mix of triumph and exhaustion. The interdimensional decree against sarcasm had been lifted, which meant no more tiptoeing around humorless aliens with a penchant for rules that made politicians look like amateurs. Zephyra Quill leaned back in her chair, a rare smile ghosting across her lips. So, we did it. The universe hasn't imploded and we're still in one piece. Who knew sarcasm could save the day? Always thought sarcasm was my third most useful talent, Kin drawled, her feet still firmly planted on the console. Right after napping and avoiding responsibility. Declan Voss, ever the optimist, was practically glowing. Maybe now we can teach them the art of the souffle. It's all about delicate timing, after all. Doc Morley, never one to miss a moment with his sandwiches, was midway through a particularly greasy salami sub. I say we celebrate with a feast. Nothing says, diplomatic victory, like cured meats. Or maybe just a shower, Juno Cade suggested, cringing as she glanced at her stained jumpsuit. I've been in the same clothes for. Let's just say they could stand up on their own at this point. Rook Thorne was still fiddling with the console, even though the duct tape had held surprisingly well through the ordeal. I'll keep an eye on the systems. Who knows when these interdimensional neighbors will get the urge to send us another cosmic joke disguised as bureaucracy. Zephyra chuckled, running a hand through her hair. We showed them something they didn't expect. Human unpredictability. And maybe a bit of madness. A lot of madness, Kin corrected. But it worked. The command deck, usually filled with the persistent hum of malfunctioning machinery and the occasional ominous pop, was strangely quiet. It was the calm after the storm, a moment of respite in a universe that seemed hell-bent on complicating itself. So, heroes of sarcasm, what now? Juno asked, looking around at her fellow crew members. Do we get medals or just a pat on the back and a stern warning not to do it again? We get to live another day, Zephyra replied, her tone light but with an edge of the pragmatism that had kept them alive so far. And maybe, just maybe, we've started something. A dialogue, a conversation that doesn't end in rules and death glares. Doc wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, leaving a trail of grease that would likely never come out. Do you think they'll ever understand why we do it? The sarcasm, the jokes? Kin shrugged. If they don't, it's their loss. But maybe they'll come around. At least now they're curious, and that's half the battle won. Rook, finally satisfied with his console work, leaned back. You know, if they ever to come visit, we should throw them a party. Show them some real human hospitality. Right, Zephyra said, rolling her eyes. Because nothing says, welcome to humanity, like a raucous party and questionable punch. Would you want it any other way? Declan grinned, spreading his arms wide. We're all about making impressions. As they settled into a more relaxed routine, the tension that had been a constant companion began to dissipate. There was a sense of achievement, a shared victory that had been hard won but was all the sweeter for it. The holographic interface flickered to life, a new message coming through from their curious neighbors. This time, it was a simple question about human culture, devoid of rules or requests for clarification. A genuine attempt to understand. Zephyra read the message aloud, her voice tinged with amusement. They want to know about our sense of humor. Why we laugh in the face of danger. Because if we didn't, we'd cry, Kin said, not missing a beat. And tears aren't as fun. Doc nodded, raising his sandwich in a mock toast. To laughter, then. It's what keeps us sane in this crazy universe. Rook smiled, a small, genuine expression that softened his usually stern features. And who knows, maybe one day they'll join in. Laugh at themselves, at us, at the absurdity of it all. Here's hoping, Juno said, her eyes bright with the possibility. We've opened a door, let's see where it leads. As they drafted their response, the crew felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving. Building bridges with wit and words rather than weapons. The message they crafted was simple, yet profound in its sincerity. An invitation to laugh, to understand, to share in the human experience. Dear friends, Zephyra read, her voice steady and strong, laughter is our way of coping with the chaos. It's how we connect, defy, and endure. We hope you'll join us in this dance of humor and hope. They sent the message, watching as it disappeared into the digital ether, a spark of light in the vast darkness. The response, when it came, was unexpected and delightful in its simplicity. A single line, we will try, thank you. The crew erupted into laughter, a sound full of relief and joy that echoed through the command deck. Looks like we're not so different after all, Declan said, his grin infectious. Just took a cosmic nudge, Rook added, a rare twinkle in his eye. Zephyra leaned back, the weight of their achievement settling in. They'd done it, made a dent in the universe, however small. Proved that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to connect, to adapt, to find light in the darkest of places. Well, she said, raising an imaginary glass, here's to us. To sarcasm, to stubbornness, and to the human spirit. May it never fade. They toasted to their victory, their laughter mingling with the hum of the ship, a symphony of sound that spoke of hope and resilience. In that moment, they knew they could face whatever came next. Because if there was one thing they'd learned, it was that humor was the best armor in an unpredictable universe. And so, they sat together in the dim light, ready to meet the future with open arms and sharp tongues. Because they were human, damn it, and that was more than enough. As the command deck settled into a comfortable silence, Zephyra allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the challenges they'd faced, the bonds they'd forged. It wasn't just about survival. It was about living, about making their mark on a universe that was as vast as it was indifferent. And they'd done it, together. In the end, it was the simplest things that mattered most. The laughter, the camaraderie, the shared moments that transcended the barriers of space and time. Because in the grand scheme of things, it was these connections that defined them. Made them who they were. And as Zephyra looked around at her crew, she knew they would face whatever came next with the same irreverence, the same determination that had brought them this far. Because that was what it meant to be human. And that, she thought with a smile, was something worth fighting for. The lights on the command deck dimmed, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. But there was a warmth there, a light that shone from within. And so, they sat together, ready to face the future with open hearts and sharp wits. Because in the end, it was humor that would see them through. That, and the unbreakable bond that held them together in the face of an uncaring universe. And as the stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to their journey, the crew knew they were ready for whatever came next. Ready to laugh, to live, to thrive. Because they were human, and that was more than enough.